Hello, good morning, and welcome to Custom Journeys, everyone. My name's Elisa Iglesias, and I'm here with my co-host.
Andrew Baines.
And thank you for joining us on another episode of Custom Journeys. Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone to please look us up on social media. You can find us at YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Google Play. If you just search Custom Journeys, that is custom with a E, CUSTEM, Journeys. And follow us on IG at Custom Journeys. And please subscribe and follow us as much as you can. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your teachers. Today, we have a wonderful guest on the show to talk about her journey through STEM, and her name is Andria Balogh. Andria Balogh, she is a regional marketing manager at Pall Corporation, and also the founder and executive director of the STEMI Youth Career Development Program here in Houston. She has a Bachelor's of Science degree in biology from MIT, a Master's of Science degree in immunology from the University of California, Los Angeles. And lastly, she has an MBA from Rice University. Thank you so much, Andria, for making the time to join us today.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
No, we appreciate you.
All right, so I guess I'll kick it off with like the first question we have. So again, thanks for joining us today. We know you're super busy. You got a lot of things you could be doing today, but we appreciate you taking our time to talk to us. So I guess we'll go ahead and get started. We always like to start with like the end in mind, and then kind of work our way backwards and kind of reverse engineer how you became who you are today. So as Eli said, you're the regional marketing manager at Pall Corporation. Can you tell us a little bit about like your job responsibilities and what you do in your current job?
Yeah, so right now I'm primarily working with trying to what we call drive leads, marketing leads, which ultimately is trying to increase our revenue for Pall Corporation. I work as part of the biotech group. We have 7 different industries, kind of what we call 7 different business units within Pall Corporation, and mine is for the biotech. So our products, we generate various bioprocessing products which support pharmaceutical companies in generating their therapeutics. So for instance, these companies that have come out with the COVID vaccine, they're using some of our products in order to generate those vaccines, generate their drugs. And so I help try and get the message out there to these pharmaceutical companies that we have these products, and I do that in various different ways, whether that's trade shows or digital ads, IP targeting, various different ways to try and get them to know what products we have for them to get their job done.
Gotcha. All right, cool, interesting. I'm trying to think like how that could benefit us in our podcast as we need to get the word out there. So that's really interesting. And so what I want to do now is I want to learn more about like your journey, because you have a very strong STEM background. We're definitely going to talk about your experiences at MIT. That's no small feat. So we're definitely going to get into that. But I guess can you kind of go back to maybe like high school and kind of walk us through like how you got interested in STEM and then leading into like deciding to go to MIT?
Yeah, definitely. So I do have a funny story. I mean, most of my trajectory is not very traditional, and I really like that because I think actually when you talk to a lot of successful people, most of us, our trajectories are not linear, and I think that's very important for students to know. When I was younger, I actually never thought about pursuing STEM. I was more interested in the arts. I thought I would be a singer, dancer, or actress, and I actually did a lot of that when I was young. And I think that's actually a lot of why I'm good at what I do, and a lot of successful people do tend to dabble and have great hobbies and are also mixed in creative with the arts. So that's also an advice I suggest to students is find a creative outlet and stick with it your entire life. But when I was in high school, I had a project for physics class, and I was good in school, but I wasn't really sure I wanted to pursue STEM. And the project in physics was an egg cart, where you put an egg at the front of the cart, and then you have to design it and engineer it to go as quickly and as close to the wall as possible, but then stop right before the wall before you crack the egg, right? And I got, when I built that, and now my dad is an engineer, so he did help me, but I built it. And we got centimeters away from the wall, extremely close. And so then my teacher wanted me to take the cart and compete in Science Olympiad with that. So we did, and it got more and more advanced, and then I had to always make sure that I was testing it. But that kind of got me interested in STEM itself, because I actually really enjoyed, that was a lot of fun for me, putting those things together. We put together roller coasters and various stuff. So that was kind of my first real enjoyment in STEM. I was always good at math, and then I also really loved physics. So ultimately, I thought when I was going to MIT that I would actually be pursuing math or physics. But it didn't turn out that way, but that's what I thought at first, yeah.
Gotcha. So I love that those high school experiences that you got exposed to like really shaped your trajectory, because I had a similar experience with physics. We had a chance to build hoverboards, we did egg drops and stuff like that, so those like really shaped my experience also. So real quick, I forgot to ask you, like, so you're from Houston, right? Or where are you from?
Well, I'm born and raised in Texas, but a good number of years were in Houston. But I've lived in different cities in Texas when I was young, before going to college.
Okay, gotcha. Perfect. So you did mention that, I love that you have like that creative arts background, and you still try to like pursue those outlets and everything like that. But you did mention MIT. So we did like a little Google search just to see like, hey, what's the acceptance rate at MIT? It's 7%. So I mean, that's pretty impressive that you got in. Can you provide some tips or advice to students who want to pursue going to MIT? Like, what tips and advice can you give to students to how they can improve their chances to get in MIT or an Ivy League school?
Yeah, so for the most part, so whenever I'm talking to students about applying to colleges, in my mind, there are two main things that are the most important. One is your letter of recommendations, and two are your essays. There's a lot of intense focus on your grades and on SATs or ACTs, your scores. I know now, especially since a lot of that scoring went away, and in fact, now that some of that scoring has gone away as a requirement for entrance into college, that just means that your recommendations and your essays are weighted even more. But they were always absolutely the most important. And then if you have an opportunity to interview at the school, you should. The real test to getting in is they want to see your personality. They want to see how much grit you have. And so any stories that you have around being able to work against adversity, or if you've had a challenge. And even when I was young, it took a lot to think of like, I've worked hard, but I've been very blessed and very privileged to not have any major issues when I was young, unlike my mom, who was extremely impoverished when she was young. So it took, a lot of my challenge actually came from created challenges, where I actually took a job and tried to do school and tried to do clubs, those sorts of challenges. But I think that sort of storyline is where the colleges see that you have grit, that you're driven, that you're passionate. They like to see that you're unique. And so all of those things really will contribute to you getting in. And then being a well-rounded person. So I did a lot of volunteer work. I know a lot of students are doing that as well. Not only schoolwork. They really don't want to see you just study. And the reason is because college is stressful, and so you really need those outlets to be successful, and they want to make sure that you have the psychological capacity to handle the stress. So if you are so focused in school that you are not well-rounded, it will bring to question whether you can handle it psychologically.
Gotcha.
That's really interesting, Andrea. I think back to my processing and applying to schools. It wasn't that sophisticated. So I'm really glad you're bringing up those points for the audience. First of all, I want to comment that sounds like you are a natural-born tinkerer, as many engineers and scientists are. So that's one thing to note for our young people. It's like it takes the grit to learn the math and the science, but if you are a natural-born tinkerer, maybe that's a track for you. But my follow-up question is, what high school did you go to, and also, is there a particular baseline level of academics that you definitely need to go to compete for a place at MIT or a place like MIT?
Yeah, so I went to Cypress Wells High School. So it was a public school, and here in Houston, Northwest Side. I mean, it was a pretty nice school. But what's funny is I remember being surrounded by cow pastures, as it feels like any place in Texas does, or at least used to growing up. But so I went there, and then as far as academics, what the baseline is. I would say yes and no. The one big thing is you should always try, even if, and I'm especially talking to the young girls out there. We have this misconception that we have to be 100% fulfill any role in order to apply to anything, including colleges. And even if you made those C's, or even if you failed a test, you should, if that's your dream, you should go for it. And for everybody, if it's your dream, you should apply. I never thought that I would get into MIT, but I'm also pretty bold, and I've learned that through my life, and I still do it till today, which is I'm no way qualified for this, but I don't care. I'm going to apply anyway. And a lot of times that will give me the best opportunities, and I don't mind the rejection. That's the other thing that you have to get very comfortable with, is this idea of rejection. I'm like, yeah, I don't have a shot, but I'm going to try anyway. And if I worried about whether I would get in, I never would have applied to MIT, and you could see how big of an issue, mistake that would have been in my life. So apply anyway. Now, if you're talking averages, yes, on average, you would need straight A's. On average, I think you would need at least like a 1,300 SAT score, something like that. That, again, if you got a few B's, or if your average is a B, or if you got a C, or even failed a test, or anything like that, I would say use that as an opportunity and actually put it in your essay. Lay it out there. Lay out the issues you have, and use it as an instance of how you learned and how you have grit, and then tell them, I know that you may take this as a negative, but here's why I take it as a positive, and here's why I know I'm good for your school. There's something to be said about somebody who is bold like that, and that's very impressive when you read an essay like that, where somebody admits to something they did wrong and yet still believes wholeheartedly in themselves and their ability to succeed.
That's a very unique answer I haven't heard in a while, but it's so true. It rings very true, especially to my experience in high school. And thank you for encouraging more people, young people, that might get intimidated at the thought of trying to get high SAT or ACT scores, or trying to have being on the dean's roll, or whatever the case may be. But thank you for saying that. It really is a lot more about grit. Yeah, no, for sure. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I like the advice that you're giving, right? Because I think a lot of times we do think that, hey, we have to be this perfect individual, and I think the advice that you're giving really speaks to, hey, you're human, you have human elements to you, so play that up in your essays and your letters of recommendations, and that play that to your advantage. One thing that you mentioned when talking about like writing an essay, and we're kind of like going a little bit off script here, is that you mentioned that, hey, you didn't really have like this whole impoverished background, and you mentioned your mom. And so we did want to bring this up because we read a little interview about you and like some of the background that your mom went through, and kind of like navigating through such a male-dominated field of oil and gas. Can you kind of speak to, you could probably tell the story a lot better than I can, number one, but then can you speak to like the influence that had, being able to see your mom like strive and achieve her goals and persevere to working in the oil and gas field?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're younger, you don't really recognize it, right? My mom just did her job. She worked hard. I think it had to do with, more hindsight and looking back at what values she set up with me. She, even to this day, has always told me that she wanted a daughter who was strong and independent and said what she wanted and went after what she wanted, and so that's how I am. Sometimes to a fault, and I have to be very careful about that. But but yeah, that's how I am. And so she set that up for me very young to be independent and to know that I really could do anything I put my mind to. And, when I was younger and I was doing dance, I was doing these advanced dance techniques, and I would get so frustrated. And she would just be in the background and just constantly telling me, throw your temper tantrum, but then you're going to get up and you're going to keep going at it because you're going to get it. And so I had that grit instilled very young, even because, I am a perfectionist. I've learned how to be less of one, how it's okay to, fail and make mistakes. In fact, it's critical. But when I was younger, I was such a perfectionist, and having to learn how to break out of that and realize that, mistakes are part of the learning process, and to be okay with that. And in order to succeed, I had to fail at something over and over. So she instilled a lot of that in me very young. And, I do remember her telling us about, because I did have a very comfortable lifestyle. And so, but I remember her talking about when she was young, not even being able to have, some of the meals were a taco, and that was it, a taco a day or 2 tacos a day. And that was all they, and it was home, tiny corn tortilla tacos, and that was it. That's all they ate. But her father and mother being extremely ambitious individuals, and she as well. She taught herself piano. She taught herself English. She got a full scholarship to college in singing. And she became the, what we call the editor of the newspaper, even though it wasn't. But yeah, so there is a lot of stuff that she did, and she taught herself. And I think that gave me the example that I can also teach myself anything I want.
But quick, Andrea, was your mom an immigrant?
No, she wasn't. She was born in the U.S. I mean, she is Mexican. My father was an immigrant. I believe my grandmother was born here in the U.S.
Okay. My
grandfather was an immigrant, yeah.
Just a little bit of technicality. I find that with Mexicans, the more apt question is, how long ago before the border was drawn did their family live in the continuous United States?
Yeah.
It's like technically they weren't ever an immigrant. The border was just drawn in between.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Nice. All right. So cool. So let's I guess trying to finish this story. So you went to MIT. What was your experience like at MIT? And you can just kind of summarize like the 4-year experience, and then what were kind of what was your experience at MIT, and then what were your thoughts about what you wanted to do next after you graduated?
Yeah, I loved MIT. It was just such a unique experience. It's definitely something where I know, I'll go back every once in a while, and it's just this nostalgic feeling, especially walking down the street and hearing students talk about quantum mechanics and then cancer research. And I love it. I miss that. I miss that feeling of just intense intellectuality in these conversations. It's just one of those places you don't get very often. It's a place that's very humbling. But everybody feels the same. Nobody goes. It's very weird. Nobody goes into MIT, or at least none of the students I met, with an attitude or an air of arrogance or excessive. We all felt average. We all felt like we were going to fail. We all felt.
Wow.
Even the students who were literal geniuses never made any of us, because I think they felt used to being ostracized because they were the geniuses, right? So all of us felt out of place, and like we were either felt average or we just wanted to have friends, and everybody felt like they were failing. So we'd all work together to try and help each other get through our problem sets. And I remember the first few problem sets, and I was like, I don't even know what they're asking me on this math problem. I have no idea what I'm doing. It's just such a, and you figure it out, and then you do decently well. But yeah, it's pretty amazing how dumb you feel. But that's also what's really beautiful. That's why they look for those psychological signs, because because you're used to being this type A top number one or top 10% or whatever, and then you go to this school and you're literally average or below than average, and the chances are high that you will be, and you have to learn how to handle that and to be okay with it. And it was such a great lesson in that's really what helped me learn how to be less of a perfectionist, that it was okay to be average in certain situations because you knew that you were around bright minds that would work with you.
Awesome. Hey, that brought back memories of me being in thermodynamics as like a sophomore or junior, where I was just like, I don't even know what the heck they're asking me to solve for, and
Yep.
they did a great job of making you feel like, yo, I know I'm smart, but I don't feel like I'm smart at all being in this class.
Yep.
So I can kind of relate to that. It's interesting that you say, like we talked about, like, hey, MIT has a 7% acceptance rate. They're like the best and brightest kids go there. But it's interesting to hear even those kids still felt like a little sense of like imposter syndrome, so to speak,
Yeah.
where it's like, hey, we don't really feel like we're smart enough to be here, or we don't really know what's going on. So
All of
is that
us
something
felt
that you
it.
struggled with specifically? I know you mentioned it, but is that something that you had to constantly battle throughout your career through STEM?
Well, I wouldn't say I battled it through my entire career. I think that helped me. That was kind of like the pinnacle, right? I'm not
Gotcha.
sure. So that helped me though be okay with being average. But yeah, I struggled with it at MIT. That's for sure. Yeah, I just completely felt average or less than average. I mean, I still wound up doing decently well,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was a very interesting experience. And then after that, I felt I don't think I think the only time I've ever I think that's why why I'm so bold now is because I think in my mindset, I'll never experience that level of not necessarily competition, but just the environment. I won't experience that again. So, why not go for anything? It clearly got me somewhere in the first place. So it got me to MIT in the first place. So I think it just kind of reinforced that I needed to go after things that I didn't think I was necessarily good at. And that it also reinforced for me that I could teach myself anything. And so I think almost I have a slight sense of, all of us entrepreneurs have this slight sense of excessive confidence that we can do anything. Throw us in the throw us in the middle of nowhere and give us a set of tweezers and we can make a house and be fine. I don't know. I almost feel like that's my level of give me a problem, I can fix it anytime.
Nice.
Throw me
I
in the
love
middle
it.
of a country, I don't know the language, I'll figure it out. Don't worry about it. So yeah.
Natural born problem solver. Could have been a good engineer as well, don't you think, Andrew?
Yeah, no, she has the makings of an engineer, definitely. So
Yeah.
Speaking of being bold, after this point, did you go on shortly thereafter to UCLA for your master's degree?
I did a year at NIH, National Institute of Health. I actually worked at the National Naval Medical Center and worked for an oncologist there and did lung cancer and immunology research, and just would travel between the medical center, the Naval Medical Center, and then NIH and do mouse studies and stuff like that. And then while I was doing that, that was kind of my break in my year. While I was applying to UCLA to go to medical school and graduate school. So that's when I got accepted into UCLA and then went there the fall of 2008. So I graduated MIT February 2007 and then started the internship the year, like May that year. And then the following fall, I went to UCLA.
Was the intent to go into medical school to become a medical doctor?
Yeah, so when I was at MIT, I didn't decide to go into biology. I mean, I wasn't initially going for biology. I actually did not like biology in high school. I thought it was boring. I thought, why, I don't need to know about sponges. This is not a field I much care about. But when I went to MIT and I took my intro to biology, The two professors, one of them was the founder of the original viral cancer virus. He was the original founder of that. And then the other, he is the head of the Genome Project from back, in 2000. And now he's also on, I think he's on a few, he's just very well known if you know who they are. And they gave me all the information and tools, and I was like, oh, this is awesome, actually. I'm really excited. And it brought up a lot of questions. It made me question a lot of things. And that's when I realized I wanted to go into science. But I didn't think I wanted to go into medical school until I saw my first brain surgery. And when I saw a brain surgery, because I'd been doing various internships, and I actually did an internship at the Massachusetts General Hospital, and I had an opportunity, and I was working on this cancer called neurofibromatosis, which occurs in the brain, typically on the auditory nerves. And so we were connected with the brain surgeons and the neurosurgeons, and when I had an opportunity to shadow, I shadowed him in the OR, and that was the coolest thing I had ever seen. I was just like, oh my God, I want to be a neurosurgeon now. Let's do this. And prior to that, I had no interest in doing medicine because I saw how hard they worked. And I saw I was like, nope, I don't see. But I also was thinking more about on the realms of internal medicine. So I didn't even think about surgery. You can see working with your hands, right? Tinkering. So that's when I decided to apply for MD PhD programs, and I did. I got into UCLA as part of their MD PhD program. So that's when I went. So sorry, long answer, but I thought it would help explain a bit more.
No. It's a perfect answer because it really leans into the windy road that you had to go through, through your STEM journey. And to be honest with you, I'll put up my 2 cents. I think that is, like you mentioned, that's more of the norm and not the exception.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think it also hones in on, when if I could give any advice, it would be take those rare opportunities when you get them. I find that those are the reasons why typically I'll have an opinion around whether I'll like a field or not. And then a random opportunity will come up where I can explore it a bit more. And even though I have made a judgment about whether I like something or not, I have learned to just try it anyway. Try it anyway, right? In the way the parents, moms, dads always say, just try it. So that would always be a message in my mind. Well, just try it. What is it going to hurt? And oftentimes I'll be amazed at the doors that open and how much I'll actually really love something about a field that I thought I would not like.
I have a sneaky feeling that this most likely helped you with your networking in your current venture, but we'll get that in a moment. Andrew, what do we got next?
No, so I just want to follow up on the UCLA thing, right? So you went into the MD PhD program, but you ended up walking out the door with a master's degree. What was kind of the thought process there? Like, what made you decide to only go with a master's degree and then pursue other ventures?
Yeah, I mean, that was a really tough place in my life. I struggled a lot, but I think it's valuable to talk about those transitions, especially right after the fact. I definitely felt like a failure where I didn't complete what I had set out to, but now I definitely don't see it as a negative. I see it as something that was very positive, and I'm definitely glad that I went through everything. But, I went in with, what changed were my goals. I went in initially wanting to be a medical scientist and teaching professor, and having my own lab while also practicing. And, switched which field I wanted to do. Initially, it was like neurosurgery. I'd love to have a lab that does science and neurosurgery and be a neurosurgeon at the same time. Because to be able to design my own experiments, test them, run a lab that does that, then be able to take the treatments or the therapies and immediately apply it to my patients would be amazing, right? That's and a lot of my path has been about application, which is a very engineering mindset, and also about solutions and things like that, which you'll start to see leads into entrepreneurship. But that's kind of what I always wanted to do. And so a transition from neurosurgery to cardiovascular surgery to congenital heart surgery. I'd shadowed all these different groups, and I really enjoyed working in all of them. And I enjoyed medicine, and I also really enjoyed working in the OR and doing those sorts of things. But Ultimately, what sort of changed, when I finished my first 2 years of med school and then went into work on my PhD, that was when a lot of things started to go negatively. I unfortunately, sometimes you work in negative environments, and in the research field, there's a lot of negative environments. And also in medicine, there can be. That's why I kept switching fields, was because I'd be meeting surgeons and I'd be like, okay, I don't want to work with these type of people all my life. Okay, so let me try this field. No, don't want to work with these type of people all my life. And the one lesson that I definitely learned was it's who you work with, determines your happiness. It's, you may love the fields and love what you're doing. I still love surgery, I still love medicine, I still love science, but I didn't like the people that I would be forced to work with day in and day out. And then when I was in research, I worked in a not so great environment. And so I became extremely depressed. I would have panic attacks going into the lab. I would avoid going into the lab as much as possible. I'd go in working at nighttime, and it was just it's a really stressful, as it is. I was working on a project that was overly ambitious, and then trying to do it while trying to navigate politics and people and everything else. So I think for me, that really made the decision that, I needed to walk away from this environment and for my sanity. And it's unfortunate because I know a lot of graduate students who either do that or switch. And I had already committed so much time, I just couldn't see, I'd almost lost my love of science in that process, and I needed to step away and recoup and figure out, okay, what do I want to do now? It was still a valuable lesson. It gave me a lot of grit. It made me realize that I really can survive anything, which is great. It's a great lesson to have, because then you really do have no fear about trying anything when you realize you can survive anything. So it turned into a very positive process, even though it was a very negative experience for me and a lot of struggle.
Hey, I appreciate that transparency and that vulnerability, because I think there's other people that go through similar challenges. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to Eli's story about getting his PhD, but he had a number of challenges. I won't speak for him, but that I don't think people really know the value of like the people that you're around and the people that you work with, and how big of an impact that can have on you in your career. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. So after you decide, hey, this isn't the best working environment for me, you kind of struggled with maybe losing your love for sciences. You said, hey, let's get a master's degree and figure out what's next. What was next after that? Because I know the MBA at Rice is like the thing that I kind of know you from, or read about you from initially. So what kind of led into the mindset of saying, hey, I love science, but I'm gonna go get an MBA, and then I'm assuming at this point you had those entrepreneurship bug inside of you already.
No, I didn't actually, and that's what's really funny. I still had in my mindset that I had no interest in business, and I didn't really know what direction I was going to go in. So I came back to Houston and continued to work in research in a research lab. Because for me it was like, well, that's all I'm good for right now. What do? I don't have any other skills. I don't know what to do. And that's actually kind of funny when you look at my resume. It's really interesting because I was working in a lab, I was making money, but when I was in graduate school, I had a lot of debt. I was very poor. Some months I couldn't even afford food because I was in so much debt. I'm in LA. I'm barely making enough to survive. It's unreal trying to think back to that. And that was also a lot of what contributed to the stress and the panic attacks and the anxiety and everything else that I was feeling out there. So, I came back and my mindset was, okay, I got a job doing research, and, I don't care too much about the research, but at least I'm making decent money. Let's get financially secure so I'm not so, stressed. And so I got a job, working as a choir director at my local church here in Houston. And then I started a tutoring company as well. So you can see I had 3 jobs at once because trying to make extra money, and I'm just trying to get stable. But that kind of, what's funny is that almost led into, that's where I think the initial bug of working in business started. When I started the tutoring company, I had to do a lot of the marketing and the advertisement. And I realized that it was actually pretty enjoyable. It brought me back to my high school years when I was the choir historian. I was in choir when I was in high school. And so I was a choir historian and having to do all the designs and the billboards and, you know, the scrapbooks and all that sort of stuff. So the creative things. So getting back to my creative roots. And so the marketing really unleashed a lot of that, and I really enjoyed it. And then I got to do tutoring on top of it. And the tutoring was so successful that I wound up making as much as my research job. And then the choir director job, which gave me, again, a creative outlet and made me bring back because I've been singing, you know, I never stopped singing, even when I was in MIT. I was at a choir there. I even joined the Harvard choir, and then when I was in med school, I was part of the UCLA choir. So I never lost the music side. And so being able to direct a choir was always something that I wanted to do as well. And so making that money there was the most that I had ever been paid per hour. So, you know, bringing all that together really kind of set up, you know, the business bug. And then I started, when I was working here in Houston, I started taking some entrepreneurship courses because a seed had been planted in, you know, that maybe I could earn my way up. If I do a PhD again, I could earn my way up to being CTO or CRO, so Chief Technology Officer, Chief Research Officer, Chief Scientific Officer, something like that. And so I started taking some entrepreneurial courses. And as I'm going through this, you know, and even when I was in graduate school, I've been told, you know, that I should pursue business, that I had a very different mindset from the typical scientist, although to be honest, I've always been told I was weird, so that's nothing new either. And so whenever I was going to doing my entrepreneurship class, I'm like, I don't want to be a CTO or CRO, I want to be the CEO. That sounds more fun. Yeah, I want to be the boss. I mean, yes, I could do CTO and CRO, but no, I don't.
Yeah. Why limit yourself?
Yeah, exactly. I want to be the CEO. I want to run the show. So, yeah, I just, I think that really, and initially when I started taking this entrepreneurial course, it was part of Rice at the time. This was before I got into the MBA. You know, you take this quiz on how entrepreneurial you are, and I was like, okay, you just want to be an entrepreneur, but you're not there yet. And by the end of the course, I took this quiz again. I was like, that's BS. I'm totally an entrepreneur. In fact, I literally started a company. I'm already there. I don't know why I had to take this course to tell me that I'm already something that I am, but clearly I had to do that in order to feel that I'm already this thing. And, you know, sometimes I still get comments of like, oh, well, you want to be an entrepreneur. It's like, no, I am. There's no question here. I am an entrepreneur. And so when I had the tutoring company, it led to the bug of starting STEMI Youth Career Development Program. But I also knew that I had a lot of gaps in business understanding and industry experience. You know, all my prior business experience was in academia. Research is such a different perspective. So that's you know, when I knew instead of a PhD, I needed to do an MBA.
Nice.
Real quick, Andria, how did you come to find this entrepreneurial program to get that training?
Yeah, so I found out about it from the lab that I worked in, but anybody can take it. I'm pretty sure anybody can walk in and take it. I can look it up, but it's like Intro to Entrepreneurship.
Yeah, please do and share that with us. I think that'll be of interest for the audience.
Yeah,
and you said you were working in a research lab, or were you working at Rice at this time?
No, I
or
was
in the
working
medical center?
I was working in the medical center, yeah, Houston Methodist Hospital. And what's funny is that it's such a small world. This is why, you know, networking is key to everything. It's always who you know. But when I was working in the research lab, we had a summer student, a summer intern. So I mentored her. She was my summer intern mentee, and her grandfather is the person who taught that course. And he was also he was the founder of a multi-million-dollar venture capitalist company. So that's where the full circle comes in.
Okay, so you got a potential angel investor in your network if you ever need some seed capital. Yeah, that's real good to have in your back pocket. Yeah. Awesome. So I got one quick question, and then it's a money question, and then we'll go into like some more professional development stuff. How much money did you make as like a with just your tutoring company like if you can kind of put like a monthly thing on it, just in case somebody out there wants to start their own tutoring business. I know that's real popular among kids, but do you recall,
Yeah.
or are you willing to share that?
Yeah, so well, I mean, it just depends on how many hours. So I'll give the number of hours. So that I charged, I think I started off charging $35 an hour, and then I went up to $45 an hour. Now I've been told many times that I could have raised it easily to $75 or $100 an hour, but I didn't want to because I really wanted to. I was working with a lot of families that were on the more impoverished side, and I wanted to still be able to access, those
Yeah.
families and be able to help them out. So I never wanted to raise higher than that. But for those people who are in it for the money, I mean, you can go to $75 or $100 an hour. At my peak time, when I wasn't working in research and I was just tutoring to sustain myself, I was working about 22 hours a week. So y'all can do that math, 22 hours, 45 an hour. And that was pretty much around 60,000 a year-ish. So it held me up as much as I was making in the research biz. And I was working half the time. So that's why I could start STEMI. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. So let's see where we're at on time. All right, cool. So you enroll in the Rice MBA program. Why did you? Okay, so for somebody who is considering doing an MBA, what is the value of doing an MBA versus like just pursuing entrepreneurship on your own?
The value is really the mindset. So there are some people who, you have corporate experience, right? If you're an engineer, you work in a very corporate company, you see the politics, maybe even you gain some hands-on experience, or you join kind of a startup and you help that process. You might come in with a decent amount of experience. Or if you go into consulting and you gain some consulting experience, then you have an understanding of the way businesses work and the way they should work. I had none of that. And for those of us who don't have a good understanding of business or the proper mindset or experience, that's where the MBA really comes in. They start you off really thinking about strategy. And then, I hadn't done true accounting or really, an actual course on finance or anything like that. And thinking about strategy mixed with finance and accounting, and then also mixing in operations and manufacturing thinking with marketing, true formal marketing. I'd done a little dabbling, but that doesn't count. So really trying to understand the breadth of business exposure. If you don't have that, then I would suggest definitely getting an MBA. I do know a lot of students who came in and really just for the degree because they did have that experience. So that's the other flip that you might want to, maybe you do have the experience, but you want the degree and you want the connections. Because the MBA, I would say the full-time rather than doing the professional or maybe even the executive. The full-time is great when especially if you're wanting to transition your job from an engineering or scientific or technical role to something else. Or if you want to level up using your degree to do so. It really does help you usually level up monetarily. And if you want to transition, it'll give you those opportunities that you need. But the networking is also amazing. You just really... If I wanted to go into VC, I know I could because of the connections I've made. If I want to, I've met so many entrepreneurs and startups and CEOs, and so it just allows you that opportunity. And again, who is everything.
Gotcha. Awesome. Yeah, that's a common theme with everybody that we interviewed is they always try to emphasize the importance of your network. So after you got your MBA, you went on to Pall Corporation. What did you get hired in? What role did you get hired in at Pall? Was it your current role or?
Yeah, it's my current role. So I've only been there, I would say about 16-ish months or so. So
Okay.
yeah, when I was doing my MBA, I actually, by the way, if y'all do your MBA and you're a minority or you support diversity, so you don't have to be a minority, but you do have to demonstrate that you have supported diversity in your career. You can apply through the consortium, and I suggest that you do. That is also a great network to build out. So I applied through the consortium. And they also do their own scholarships in addition to Rice doing their own scholarships. And, you can get kind of a mixture of both or different things that work out that way. So
So how big? I'm sorry. So how big is like the scholarship? Are we talking about like a full ride to MBA? Because I know MBA programs can be expensive. So
Yep.
okay, wow, awesome. All right.
What,
Yep.
real quick,
Yeah.
what is the consortium?
The Consortium is a nonprofit organization that supports minorities and diversity in business. So the way that they work is they adopt in MBA students, but then they also adopt in colleges. So like Rice University is adopted into the program. They are part of the consortium. And then they have a consortium program where certain students from the Rice University are part of the consortium program at Rice. And those students are, I don't quite know what the politics are for the scholarships, but different schools do it differently. But it does allow for scholarships and things like that. If you're, and not every student who's in the program gets scholarships. There's a certain, every
Gotcha.
school does it differently, but that's how that works. And then the consortium adopts in companies, so you get first access to Fortune 500 companies and their internships. And so a lot of these companies that are really trying to actively drive their diversity come to the consortium conference, which happens before MBA school even starts. So I got 3 internship offers before I even started my MBA. So.
Wow.
So you get first access, and the consortium individuals are amazing. Like the students are amazing. They're all accomplished. They're just, that conference in and of itself is so humbling because you just are around students a lot of them have started companies. A lot of them are consultants. It's amazing being among that group of minority students who are extremely accomplished. And so when I did the consortium conference, that's where I got the offer for an internship at Pall as part of Danaher. So it was on behalf of Danaher. And so then that was in 2018 is when I got the offer, but in 2019 is when I did the internship. And I actually worked with the chief technology officer and his director under him to do the 3-year strat plan. So that was my internship project, was working on the 3-year strategic new product development plan for the company. And then finished up my last year. That's also where I got my once I completed that internship, they gave me the full-time offer, completed my last year as part of the MBA, and then joined Pall as a regional marketing manager, which I'm in now.
Awesome. Okay, so we're gonna jump in real quick to some like professional development questions that we have, or that we think other people might have. So one of the big challenges, and you of course will know this better than us, probably haven't experienced it firsthand, is that there's always like this battle for women to get equal pay in the workforce. Is that something that you've had to struggle, or that you've had to like fight with? And I guess a follow-up question would be, if for a female STEM professional or engineer or just professional in general, what can they do to make sure that they're not like underpaid for their position compared to like their peers? Do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, so I think for me on the pay side, I haven't, since I've been in academic research, we've all been paid low. So I haven't had to, as a woman,
Here.
So, and they all set standards. So it's like, y'all are all paid poorly. So we were, I was equally paid poorly. But I have experienced sexism, in the various fields. Whenever you're talking about surgery, it's a very male-dominated fields. Whenever you're talking about business, very male-dominated fields. I done a lot of other things that were very male-dominated, but I'd also. I think, again, this comes from my mom. It's something that I'm very comfortable with and I'm used to and I expect it. But yeah, I've definitely experienced sexism, the way that, you can get shut down or mansplained, or people will talk over you, or they'll take an idea of yours and push it as their own, or you won't even get invited to the table in the first place as a woman. So, and yeah, I know the pay issue is real. It's concrete. There's data behind it. There's no question it exists. It's a problem. I think the one thing about me is, since I am used to working in a male-dominated field, and I went to MBA school where we actually taught how to negotiate, which I thought was an awesome course. I have no problem negotiating. I negotiate everything all the time. Not everything in my life, everything business-wise.
That's good.
And and I tell everybody to do the same. But I do still see it where my colleagues at my same level, just as business savvy and everything as I am, hesitate to negotiate. And it's like, no, you negotiate everything.
Gotcha.
They're not going to, if you approach it in a very respectful way, and not like a, well, if you don't give it to me, I'm going to leave type attitude, but in a, hey, look, I'm going to lay it out for you. Here are the 3 reasons why I deserve the raise, or why I think I deserve more, and here's concrete examples and this and that. And you say, you do it in a respectful and appreciative way. Even if they say no, you're not going to jeopardize your offer. If they're worth working for, if they're a company worth working for, they won't be like, oh, well, you asked for more, so now we're going to just strip the whole offer. But it is also intact in how you deliver your request and how you negotiate with them. That's probably the advice that I would say is, number one, make sure that you negotiate everything. In fact, there's a reason there's a range of pricing, not only based on skill, but because for the most part, if they are a truly professional and well-established company, they expect you to negotiate. So if you hold off and you don't negotiate, that only is negative for you. That's great for them. So you should negotiate. That's why they put the extra range in there. So do it, negotiate. Number 2 is make sure you know what ranges your profession should be offered. So do your research. Google it, Glassdoor, figure out what you should be paid. Talk to your colleagues. There's this idea that you shouldn't talk about pay. That's BS. That you should. You should know what your colleagues make. Y'all should talk to each other. That only empowers each other. It's not about bragging. It's about education and awareness and research. So figure out what your colleagues are being paid, do your research on what you should be paid, and use that as one of your 1, 2, 3 reasons why you should get paid more or negotiate. And then the third would be to list out your 1, 2, 3, your reasons, and make them data driven. And it doesn't, I don't mean data as in you have to have a number attached to everyone, but if you can at least have 1 or 2 numbers, this is what the pay is, this is where I stand, here's the gap, this is why I should be paid more. Some of them will be experience-based. I have 3 years more experience than your typical average so-and-so person. That's why I should get paid more. So what are your concrete reasons that you truly believe that you deserve to be paid more? And you should have them all listed out and ready to go and ready to hand over the data. If you can prove it, they can't deny it in terms of your evidence. They can't say that, oh, well, you didn't really think about this, or you didn't have a plan. Now, that doesn't mean that they'll accept it, but at least I think they will respect you and your ability to lay out your proposal and defend it appropriately.
Gotcha. Hey, those are all perfect recommendations. I do have one follow-up though. So let's think about the 22-year-old recent or new grad from college, right? He doesn't know anybody at XYZ company. The best he or she can do is go on Glassdoor.com, and it might be a pretty big pay band. What advice or recommendation would you have for them if they're trying to negotiate their salary? And they may not, to your point about having your 1, 2, 3 points, they may not have a ton of experience. The best they may have is an internship or a co-op, but maybe they feel like they're being lowballed because maybe she's a woman, she feels like she's being lowballed. Maybe he or she is a minority, so they feel like they're being lowballed. What advice would you give them for collecting that data and then using that to their advantage to negotiate their salary?
So it may feel like you don't have data points, but you do. If you felt like you went to a prestigious school, then that's a data point. If you did well in your classes and you had a high GPA, that's a data point. Yeah, if you did an internship or you have an amazing letter of recommendation from somebody who has Pall, that's a data point. Also, if you're again doing research and you do find that range and that minimum is higher than your offer, that's a very clear data point that you're not being given what you deserve. But even so, even if you feel like, okay, maybe I don't have the best data points or whatnot, I would still negotiate, put something where it doesn't seem like absurd. Like you're not asking for $20,000 more. Maybe you're asking for $5,000 or $10,000 more with a little room to negotiate. So just try. I mean, what is it going to do? Again, if you can say, look, I worked hard. This was just what I was expecting. I was really hoping for something a little bit more. I would love to work for your company. I love what y'all do. I'm very interested. It's just, I would really like to see a higher pay of an additional $10,000. And they, just play it.
Gotcha. And one quick follow-up before Eli takes over. Do you recommend negotiating like your salary, your signing bonus, your relocation package, all of it across the board? Okay.
All of it.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. Just wanted to put that out there for people.
But know what your priorities are, and why. So if you would, when I was negotiating, start with your, I wanted to start with my base pay because I wanted to see that recurring revenue. But as soon as that was kind of a no, then I said, okay, well, what about the sign-on bonus? And so know what your priorities are and where you want to negotiate. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome.
All right. We're going to try to streamline a little bit from here on out. There's so many different points we want to dig into, Andrea, in your career. That's so interesting. And oh my God, Andrea, we should definitely bring her on for a negotiation-only episode if she's willing to do it. Yeah. I think that would be amazing. But
I'll bring on the professional where our teacher, our professor, now she literally does negotiate everything in her life, so she's good. She's
okay,
good.
Then we can do like a mock negotiation.
Yeah.
But so, go ahead, Andrew.
I'm sorry, Eli. I'm so sorry. I think I know what question you're about to ask. I just wanted to ask a different one last money question. Are you comfortable saying like your salary, like how much you make as like a regional marketing manager?
I can't because I've been told I'm not allowed to right now.
You signed to an NDA?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
But what I would say is if you Googled Pall or GMDP, salaries, you'll find our numbers. Yeah.
Okay. All right, cool. I'm sorry, Eli. Go ahead, man.
No, it's a good question. It's something that we like to ask all of our guests just to give. It's a question I get when I used to be teaching from my students. Like, how much does an engineer make? Is it worth all the hassle of going through the STEM degree? So it's a good question to ask for a little point of motivation.
Yeah.
So, but to follow up though, and I'll try to connect these two questions we want to ask you. First, for a younger person that maybe hasn't developed a sense of confidence, what points of advice you have for them to confidently go for a new opportunity or to negotiate their salary? And part two, if they wanted to go for a leadership position, what points of advice would you give a younger person to succeed and set themselves apart as a leader?
So to build confidence, that's a hard one because that's really just something that I think comes with time. Although there is something to be said about, the whole fake it till you make it. I other than that, you just really have to hone in on the things that you do well. And I don't mean do the things that you're only good at. That's not what I mean. And what I mean by is if you're trying to build up your confidence, remind yourself of all the accomplishments that you've done and what you're good at. And remind yourself that makes you more than just enough, that you are capable. Now, can we all grow and learn and be better? Yes, and we all do. But it's just about, I think it's a mindset. It's really about, when you're young, it's always very easy to hark in on the negative things about yourself, your intelligence or how you look or how you did on various things or how sporty you are. And it's so easy to just get in this death spiral of how not good you are at things. Well, the thing is that you have to do a mind switch where you have to do the exact opposite, which is daily actively tell yourself what you're good at. And it sounds very stupid, but I know it works because I've actually done it to myself. Where
so like positive affirmations, kind of.
Yeah, where I was always in this place of very negative thinking. And, one day I just decided, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of hating myself or, not liking where I am. And so anytime I would say, I took on this task where anytime I'd say something negative about myself, I'd say 3 things that were positive. And it was so annoying at first. I was like, oh, this is stupid. Why am I doing this? But then I would do it every time. And then eventually it took some time, it took a few months, maybe even a year. I'm not really sure, but something happened. And then I stopped hearing the negative voices all the time. It just went away. It stopped completely. It was very weird. But now I don't have to do that positive thinking. I just... if I do say something negative, I immediately cut myself off and I'm like, no, I'm awesome. What are you talking about? Like, why am I getting down on myself about this? Yeah, I could have done better. So learn from it, fix it, learn from it. Don't do it next time. But I don't need to be beating myself up over it. It's okay. I'll learn from it. But it's a mindset. You really got to build it and you got to work it like any muscle. So it is hard and it takes time. And when you're young, you're impatient. And this is one of those things that you can't be impatient about. You just got to do it. And the positive affirmations things do really work. Yeah. I would say, though, if you do have any sort of psychological issue where you do have depression, I've gone through that before, you do have anxiety or something, go get help, talk to people. It is a real disease. It is something that you do really need help on. Be open, be vulnerable. It's real. Don't let people tell you to just get over it. And the positive affirmation thing may be part of a treatment plan, but suddenly just telling yourself positive things when you truly have clinical depression is not going to switch it out and you just suddenly be happy like people wish it worked. So go get help and do what you got to do, if you do feel those things. And then as far as being a leader and the qualities to be a good leader, so I think the biggest thing, especially when you're young, you first think that a leader is all about telling people what to do. Oh, I know people want to follow me and I just tell them what to do and then we all succeed and we all live in a happy place, right? And it doesn't work like that. Leadership is always about supporting others and being humble and actually listening to what others say. I'm an idea person. I have these ideas and I just want to tell everybody, and then I have this perception, oh, if I tell people, they'll all understand and then they'll all love it and they'll all follow me and we'll just make the world a happy place. And it doesn't work like that. You have ideas, but as a leader, it's not about you and your ideas. It's about them and their ideas. And it's about letting them voice their ideas, they coming together. And even if you don't agree with it, that's, letting the course happen and seeing where it goes. So it's really more about being humble and supporting and that sort of thing. Now, I'm not always the best at it. I still fall back on my, I have this idea, let's do it. But sometimes, I got to shut up and I try to remind myself that.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad Eli asked that because I think a lot of times we don't really factor in the mental component that goes into being successful. And I think also I like to follow Gary Vaynerchuk. And he always talks about like being patient. Like a lot of times at 22, you graduate, you're like, oh my God, I got an engineering degree, but I don't know what I want to do in my life. And a lot of times we're just so used to like wanting to have the ideas or the final ideas set out. But just keep in mind that, hey, you got to be patient with these things and work your way through it. So real quick, thanks for like taking us through like your professional journey. We couldn't have you on here without you highlighting and talking about STEMI. And this is probably like the most interesting thing. What I think is personally the most interesting thing. Me and Eli, everybody that we've interviewed now, they all have the mindset or some either the mindset, a nonprofit, or something where they're trying to give back, a mentality and a spirit for giving back and helping others. So can you talk about STEMI and what they do?
Yeah.
And what was kind of the motivation for creating it?
Yeah, definitely. So I started STEMI at a place in my time where I was like, I don't know what I want to do with my life, which is always, by the way, if you're ever in that place, it's an awesome and very powerful place because you can do anything. That's like when you're in limbo, that means you can do anything. And so it's a very exciting time, even though it may feel like a very scary time. But yeah, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I don't know, I just had this, I was doing tutoring And I had this idea where I wanted to, I was working with some students, and I met with lunch with my mom, which my mom is always a great point of innovation. And we were talking about how when I was young, I did this space settlement basically design competition, but it was called the Mars competition when I did it. That's how old it was. It was initially the Mars competition back in, it was like 2000, I think like 1999, 2000. And we were talking about how my tutoring students don't have access to something like this. And I was like, you're right. And she said, well, wouldn't it be cool if you maybe started something where they could have access to some of these activities that you had access to, but they don't? And I was like, yeah, that actually would be really cool. And initially it was a club idea. I was going to be like, okay, I'll get some of my tutoring students together and we'll do a few competitions or things like that, fun little things. It'll be a group of 6 or so and so. And then I started thinking, well, a lot of this issue has to do with not really knowing what companies, what they want to, what careers they want to pursue in the future, the pathway, because they're not really exposed to speakers. They really don't know what that career actually looks like. And so that's kind of what led me to think about speaking engagements. And so then I started talking to some professionals about inviting them on to speak to students. And I spoke to one who's now a good connection of mine, but he's Dr. Billy Cohn. He is, I think he's a director at J&J Innovations now, but he's also a cardiothoracic surgeon and a serial entrepreneur. And so he was willing to come and speak to students. And so as soon as he said yes, I was like, oh crap. That means now this has to be bigger than just a 6-student little club. And I think that also just spawned a whole lot of things. And so then I sat back and had another lunch with my mom, and I was like, I think this needs to be a company. And she's like, no, this was not where I was going. This is not what I was suggesting for you. You just, I give you an inch and you go 20 miles. And so that's what happened. And so I was like, well, I think this needs to be a company. And then I saw it. Most entrepreneurs, I don't know, different experiences, but for me, I saw the vision of STEMI and it felt real already. It felt like it already existed. And I had this intuition no, it will be successful. I don't even have a question about that. It will be 100%. All I need to do is just do the work. I just need to lay the bricks, and it'll just form itself because it already exists in my mind. And I was so certain of that is why I built it, because I knew that there was no doubt in my mind that this would be real and that it would be successful. Now, have we had our struggles? Of course, everything. Yeah. But that was the initial. And so what we do, long roundabout story, we teach STEM and entrepreneurship to youth. We do that through workshops and speaking engagements. Our hands-on activities are meant to be realistic, so it's not just you're just building an egg cart or you're building a bridge. It's really about you have to put together, you're working with a team of students you've never met. You have an hour to build a bridge, build the proposal, pitch it. You're scored on the proposal itself. You have to think about innovation, structure, everything else. So there's a lot more. I'm bringing in professional skills too with pitching and proposals and time management and budgeting and thinking about all that sort of stuff. So it's a lot more than just building something. I want them to get the experience. We really also talk about salaries of the professions and other things, like if you're going into research, it's not just experiments. You need to enjoy reading. You need to enjoy writing. You need to enjoy giving, presentations. So if you don't like communicating, you're going to have a problem with this field. And a lot of students go in thinking, oh, I just sit at a bench by myself in silo and I don't have to talk to anybody, and that's not true. So really trying to break down that understanding of what a job actually has. And then we have a 3-day startup workshop. We've done a few STEMI labs where we've actually brought students into the lab and taught them how to do experiments. And then we have our space settlement entrepreneurship competition, which is, I found the Mars competition I did and the original people who started it. And I even met up with the original. I mean, it was so crazy to see them almost 20 years later, you know, and they're still running. And the original individual, Norman Chaffee, he remembered me, and we had lunch together. It was really crazy. But they're still going. And so now we have a side-by-side competition where they run the design competition, and then we run the entrepreneurship competition, and they intertwine and they run together. So it's kind of interesting that way. And so, yeah, then we have our internship program where the students, we have high school students who run everything. There's just so much going on. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Hey, real quick question about the internship thing. Is that, do the students intern at STEMI, or do you kind of connect the students with companies in the area?
No, they intern at STEMI. We are in the middle of starting a mentorship program where that would hopefully lead into some internship opportunities for students at companies, but that's down the road. No, this would be internships at STEMI. We have about 20 different teams run our social media, our website, connect with journalists, blog writing, magazine writing, programming, all sorts of stuff.
That's a great experience that they're getting doing that. So real quick, are there any, I know you mentioned the mentorship program is something that you're working on. Is there any specific program that's coming up that kids need to be aware of, that they should be on the lookout for in terms of like applying to or
Yeah, so for students who need tutoring help, we have a free tutoring program that just launched. So we have tutors on standby. So if you need help, please sign up. It's free, and we'll connect you with the tutors. We also, like I said, be on the lookout for our mentorship program. That will launch probably around, I want to say May next year, but applications will hopefully open by the end of this year for our mentorship program. We're also, for those students who are very into research, y'all are part of the Science and if you aren't part of the Science and Engineering Fair of Houston, you should be if you are into research. It's one of the largest, I think it's the largest science fair in Texas. So for those students, and also students outside, by the way, we are starting, it's actually pretty much started, the Academic Journal of STEM Research. So where students under college, younger than undergrad, or if you completed the research prior to undergrad, you can publish your posters, your abstracts, and your articles to the Academic Journal of STEM Research, and it's an open source free, so now then you can say that you've published.
That's absolutely amazing, Andrea, for so many reasons. If there's any reason for a young person to attempt to see if they like doing research, that would be the number one program. I think that would open up a lot of opportunities for people that might not have access to all these upper echelon journals. So one quick follow-up, Andrea. Where could a young person, a student, go online or by phone to reach out to STEMI to get a hold of those resources?
Yeah, so check out our website that has all of our contact information. It's STEMI, STEME.org. And it has our phone number on there, so if you do want to call, there's a contact form. You can sign up for our newsletter. Follow us on social media. Again, there's a lot of informative stuff that happens on our social media, and this is for both parents and students. So you find out our events via social media, all our blogs and our podcasts, all our YouTube interviews, everything comes out on those, so make sure you follow as well.
Awesome. Thanks for providing that. I got one last question about STEMI. So when you talked about how clear the vision was for STEMI, like I remembered when I called Eli and I said, hey, let's start this podcast, bro. Like, I got an idea for this. And even since then, I have like a very clear picture of like what this is. And I won't get too spiritual, but I believe God gave me this vision because it's like, hey, this is what you should be doing. So what does that vision look like for you for STEMI? Like, what is the final goal, like the end goal for STEMI and like the impact that you guys want to have long term?
Yeah, so when I first started STEMI, and I would love for this to come to fruition. I no longer, hold tight to, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, but I hope it does. When I first started STEMI, I saw it as a $1 billion nonprofit where we do our virtual, but we have brick and mortars across the U.S. and even internationally, We are able to do a STEM exchange program internationally, where we bring in students from foreign countries here, and we send students for our STEM programs, in different workshops and internships and things like that. We have a makerspace and a wet lab for students to work in these brick and mortars across the U.S. And that's why we would be $1 billion, because those facilities are so expensive. Students are able to do research and test and work in those facilities for free, and come up with experiments and then publish, and basically just play, but in real stuff, play in real science and play in real engineering. And we help students program real solutions for their communities, whether that's app-based or web-based programming. And yeah, that's kind of how I see it going, with courses and workshops and we help students start in high school and junior high. We help them start startup companies, whether that's for-profit or nonprofit. That's what I would love to see in STEMI, or in any company, to be honest. I would love, even if STEMI just leads to somebody else having an idea that ultimately takes on the vision of STEMI and moves it forward. That in and of itself is enough.
Awesome. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, Andrea, we can talk another hour about your career and everything else, but unfortunately the thunder outside my window is telling me otherwise. It's telling me to cut it off before the power goes out. So anyway, but first, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and sharing the struggles through the journey, because that will be very there's going to be a lot of people that resonate with those feelings. I know I do from my personal experience in research.
Yeah.
But to conclude, we always like to send our guest a big picture question. So, and in some ways, you're already approaching this with your work with STEMI. And so the ending question is, if you had the Infinity Gauntlet, and in some ways you're kind of constructing an Infinity Gauntlet right now, but if you had one where you can snap your fingers and you can provide a resource, a policy change, whether that be national, local, or global, what would you do to have more people of color? Yeah. Pause for dramatic effect.
Eli?
See, that's why Andrew wanted to bring me on, because I'm that good.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly.
No, but if you can change one thing to bring in more women of color, more Latinas into the entrepreneurial space, into STEM, into the nonprofit space that you're in, what would you do?
That's difficult, because it's not really a problem that can be solved with one thing, right? It's a system. It's multifactorial. The causal issues are multifactorial. I think for me, and I'm just hearing the return thunder now. I think for me, probably the one thing would be free education across the board, all the way through, free education, and a course in entrepreneurship, as or somehow integrating entrepreneurship into the current curriculum from elementary. They're totally capable. I know they are. It's being done already, but integrating it in and making sure that all the little girls are exposed to it. I think that's such an empowering subject. Just the mindset, even just the mindset is the heart of the issue. I don't think our little girls are being provided with the proper mindset that they need to when they're young. And of course, that's a fault on our society and our education system. So those would be the two main things that I would do.
Awesome. That's a beautiful answer. I mean, I love when Eli asks these questions, because it really makes people think. And then also what we're finding is that some of the answers are very similar in terms of, number one, just providing like the financial access to everybody.
Yep.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll just to echo Eli's statements, because we're trying to make sure we wrap up quickly. We really, really, really appreciate you coming on, Andrea, and taking time out of your day to be so transparent and provide advice and recommendations for others.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. This was great.
Thank you.
Awesome. Any concluding thoughts, Eli? Or you good?
No, let her have the final word,
Yeah.
man.
Okay, cool. So, anything you want to add, Andrea, before we close out?
Not that I can think of. Just make sure you guys make sure our audience at least just believe in yourself. Go after anything. Don't and it's okay to struggle. Don't feel like a failure. We fail, but that doesn't mean we should feel like a failure for it. So just keep plugging along. You'll be successful.
Awesome. All right. So, Andrea, don't hang up. I'm about to stop the recording.
Yep.
But thank you all for tuning in for another episode, another interview with Custom Journeys. It's been a pleasure interviewing Andrea. My name is Andrew Baines.
I'm Eliseo Iglesias.
And
we're out
of here. All right.
Don't hang up.